counting much slower today, Jordan. What is happening, everybody? Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock, and we've got a good baseball slate today. We got a 3-game basketball slate, and then Josh and I'll be hopping on playback after the NBA show is over to sweat some of those games out and also react to any sort of late-breaking news that we might have for basketball, because that's actually been happening a good amount lately where players have been getting ruled out post-lock. We have been making changes to lineups. So check out all our content the rest of the day as you're watching this show. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, also being simulcast over to playback, and joined here by Matt Belman. We're sponsored by Underdog, who just released a massive best ball contest. Do you ever do best ball at all, Matt?
I am not a best ball bro. Are you?
So I wouldn't consider myself a best ball bro. I am somebody who has dipped his toes in the water of best ball. I've played a lot of NBA best ball. I haven't done too much football, although I did do a good amount of football best ball stuff last year. I'm not one of the people who's been doing contests and doing drafts in like April or anything like that, but I know there is a big market for it. And there was a massive contest. The latest iteration of the big underdog contest for 2024 just came out. In total, $17 million in prizes across all the contests they put out. So massive prize pools over at Underdog. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, you can sign up using the link we have below. That's going to get you a deposit bonus of up to $100. Also free squares they have all the time for pick'em stuff over on Underdog. But yeah, if you're into best ball, you should check out some of those new contests that Underdog just put out there, because they are big contests. And yeah, I see RDC Brian in chat said, did best ball for NFL already start? I think people start drafting. There are people who are truly insane degenerates who start drafting like the day after the Super Bowl. Some of those people.
That will never be me, but it's a fun concept. So I still play decent season long for baseball and football. So like that, I don't need that itch for best ball, I guess. But I'm sure once I got into it, I'd be hooked.
Yeah, it's I'm sure there is a pretty big edge to it as well if you're somebody who really grinds the NFL draft and things along those lines. But yeah, go check out some of those big contests. $17 million in prizes over at Underdog. Also, we got our baseball slate to talk about today. Of course, that's what we're here to discuss. If you guys have questions for us and you're leaving us super chats in YouTube, we'll certainly be checking those out. If you're a subscriber at Stochastic, you have access to our Discord channel, which comes with any single package you sign up for at me over the course of the show. I'll always be having my eye on our Discord channel to answer any questions that come in. But let's start by talking at some of the pitchers that we have here, Matt. And it's an interesting slate for pitching. Earlier in the day, when Lofty and I were doing the strategy show, I was pretty sure we're going to see some ownership change later on in the day, because I was like, really, people are only 28% of people playing Joe Ryan today in large field tournaments. That actually still holds true as the number. He's in a price tier of his own. He's $10,400. There's only 2 other pitchers who have been priced above 9K. So I want to start by asking you, what are you going to do with Joe Ryan, who seemingly only pitches against shitty teams in the AL Central? And those are all the starts he makes this season.
Yeah, another Joe Ryan against the White Sox slate. I like him. I think he's the top pitcher on the slate. He doesn't look that much different to me than like Fried, even Pepio. I like Garrett Crochet a lot on the other side of this game. But given the lack of options, yeah, I think he probably should be pulling more ownership, but I think it's mostly what you said. He's in a pricing tier by himself.
That's where I'm at too. And for cash games, pretty easy button to click on. I think you're the same thing I said this morning. Joe Ryan, Max Fried. Those are your cash game pitchers on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I still think you want to be going to Joe Ryan against the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox offense sucks. It's been terrible this year. I know they are coming off a good series against the Tampa Bay Rays. And yeah, they weren't going to maintain what was like a 28 or 32 win pace the entire season. They're not quite that bad, but they're pretty fucking shitty. So it's a team that's going to be bad. Their offense is going to be bad. It's going to strike out a whole bunch. If I'm paying up for a pitcher today, Joe Ryan is the guy that I want to be going to. And another big part of that too is the guys who are priced below him, Nick Lodolo, Ryan Pepio. I don't have a mass amount of interest in these guys. Are these pitchers that you're looking to get to today?
Not really. I don't mind Pepio. I think he's got upside at 9,100. I don't love the spot, especially on the road. Lodolo is a no-go for me. Just hate the matchup. So, no, not really. I think that it's Ryan kind of by himself here.
Yeah, that's why if I have the money to spend up for somebody, it's going to be Joe Ryan. And I don't really see a pivot that I want to get to here. Not saying I need to have Joe Ryan in 100% of my lineups or anything like that. He's far from that sort of guy, but I'm going to be likely a little bit overweight to the field when I'm finalizing my lineups here. And I'm surprised it ended up being more popular. What I am kind of surprised by, though, is the amount of ownership going to Max Fried. We got another one of these situations where pitchers just uber popular against the Seattle Mariners. And I do get it. It's been a little bit of an underwhelming offense relative to expectations. There are a ton of strikeouts to be had in that lineup. But Max Fried at $8,700, while he is somebody that I think makes sense in cash games, and I'm going to be playing some of them in tournaments, I don't think he's worth the 32% ownership it's going to him at. I'm going to be underweight to the field to him, especially because there are a lot of pivots that I'm liking in this mid-range. We'll talk about some potential pivots here in a second. But if we're talking about Max Fried's ownership on DraftKings at $8,700, if you were playing a bunch of lineups, would you want to be above 32%, at 32%, or below that mark?
Probably at or around or lower. If I'm like playing 150, he is getting too much ownership. Like when you look at the top pitcher percentages, and when you consider just large field tournaments, the need to get different. I'm not sure though, as someone who plays like 3-4 lineups, that's the spot I want to get different with, just because I don't love the other options on this slate. I think there are guys that are in play, but I understand why he's picking up that ownership.
So here's the question. To an extent, I do. It's just a little bit too much for me. Good pitcher ballpark for sure. Park upgrade against the Mariners. There's strikeout upside, but it's also somewhat of a potent offense. Also, no ownership going on the Mariners side. We'll talk about the potential of them as a leverage option later on in the show here. But it's just really the ownership that gets me when it comes to Max Fried. I think it's a little bit too much because there are other pitchers in this range, not that have maybe the same security in terms of resume and acumen that Max Fried has, but I think there's other pitchers with more strikeout upside than Max Fried, or at least historically how they've pitched in this price range. If you were going to pivot off of Fried, the other pitchers we have in the 8K range are Bryce Miller, Garrett Crochet, Christopher Sanchez, Luis Severino. Severino has actually come all the way up to 21% ownership. He's become quite a bit more popular than he was this morning. That's one pitcher who's moved around quite a bit. But all these other guys are 13% owned or lower in our projections right now. If you had to pivot off of Max Fried and go to any of these other pitchers in the 8K range, is there a particular guy that stands out to you?
Yeah, it's definitely Garrett Crochet. I think you can play them together. I don't need to pivot from Fried. Maybe that's who I play instead of Joe Ryan. But I know you've talked about this a lot. His expected numbers are just way better than his actual numbers imply. I'm willing to go right back here against the team that strikes out a lot.
And when it comes to Crochet, shitty luck this year. Terrible luck. His strand rate, and I know I said this for his last start, and then it was just the same thing ended up happening where his strand rate of like 50% again in that kind of game. But he's generating a ton of swing and misses. The strikeout rate is really high. And while he does have an ERA of around 6, his expected ERA is still close to 3. So the underlying numbers are really good when it comes to Crochet. This will happen in small sample sizes to open up the season. You know, maybe there are some concerns where it's just like, hey, this is a guy who's traditionally been a reliever, who's transitioning to a starter role. Maybe he is just somebody who's not great at pitching out of the stretch as opposed to the windup. And maybe that is contributing to some of his issues. But it's really hard for me to believe that a guy who has a 6.37 ERA, but a 2.59 expected ERA isn't going to turn things around sooner rather than later. And especially for DFS purposes, because of what the strikeout upside is. Crochet, 32% K rate. So even as he's moving to a starting role from the bullpen, it is not impacting his stuff or his ability to generate swing and misses. I still think the upside is there. But what's most important to me about Garrett Crochet, 5% ownership. Of every other pitcher that's in this 8K range, I think there's a really strong case to be made that Crochet has the most upside as far as strikeout stuff goes. And he's our lowest owned pitcher in this range. I'll read off all these ownerships for you guys. Bryce Miller is pitching against the Braves and is 7.5% owned compared to the 5% ownership going to Garrett Crochet. 32% for Max Fried. Christopher Sanchez, 13% owned. And they've got Luis Severino, who I've been high on Severino this year, but 21% ownership going to Luis Severino in a tough matchup against the Chicago Cubs. I don't know how we've gotten to a point where I went from banging the drum of I want to play Luis Severino every slate to being like, hey, you guys are crazy. What do you make of Luis Severino being a chalk option now against the Cubs that everybody's trying to get to here? So considering the other options in the ownership, Crochet is the guy that I like being overweight to the most in this range.
Yeah, same. I don't feel great about it, and it's no guarantee to change tonight, his fortunes, that is. But I think you're right about the small sample size, the bad luck, all that. And I like this matchup. Don't like it as much with Correa back, but it is what it is. So I'm with you here.
And just pulling up Discord here, see if any questions have come in. Not quite yet, but yeah. So Garrett Crochet is the guy in this range. Relative to ownership, he's my favorite contrarian option. As far as the other pitchers go, we've got Christopher Sanchez in this range, Luis Severino. Is there anybody else that, for whatever reason, stands out to you amongst the 8K pitchers?
No, that's a big reason why Crochet is the guy for me, because I think all these guys are really similar and his ownership is the lowest. So no.
So the one thing that does stand out to me is this ownership going to Luis Severino. Because when we talk about stacks now, if Severino is going to hold 21% ownership he's the third most popular pitcher on the entire slate. I don't want to play 21% owned Luis Severino nearly as much as the field does, but I am going to have to consider making some leverage stacks on the Chicago Cubs on the other side. Severino's 21% ownership. What do you think it is that's gotten to be this popular today?
Cubs lineup is not as good right now without Bellinger. They're striking out at a decent clip. Tanner Houck just carved them up last night. They don't have a ton of scary bats throughout their lineup, but I'm with you. Like, ownership on Severino is too high here. The Cubs aren't my leverage du jour. I prefer Pittsburgh against a similarly owned Joe Boyle, but I think you can quibble between the two.
And I know you just said no, but one more time before we move on here. 8K range, whether it be Christopher Sanchez, Bryce Miller, anything else to add here? If not, we can look at we'll look at just all the punt options together after this.
No, I will say about Bryce Miller, I know you kind of, when you said he was getting more ownership than Crochet, like, he is slightly, and it's a spot I don't want to play him, but he is a much better pitcher right now than Crochet. I don't think anyone would argue that.
Maybe. I mean, Crochet's underlying numbers are really good. Bryce Miller's pitched well this year as well. It's also an issue to me, just Bryce Miller pitching against the Braves as well. It's a brutally difficult matchup.
For sure. Like, I think that I know that I like Crochet a lot more here. And honestly, I'm not going to be surprised at all if Crochet ends up being higher on than Miller, just because of what we're saying.
So let's look at some of the punt options where the ownership's kind of spread out. Joe Boyle was over 20% owned earlier in the day. That's come down a little bit. He's now owned in the teens. Got a handful of guys that are picking up ownership here. Jamison Tyone is 10% owned. Matt Waldron is 14% owned. Bailey Falter is 11% owned now. Griffin Canning's come down a little bit. He's no longer double-digit owned compared to this morning, but still he's at 8% ownership. We've also got Joe Boyle, mentioned before. He's come down from over 20% owned to now being 18% owned, which I think there's a couple of reasons we're seeing spread ownership in this cheap price range, Matt. Number one, the Dodgers have the highest team total on the slate by a very wide margin. People want to jam the Dodgers. The Dodgers are so expensive. You have to roster punt pitchers to get to the Dodgers. But then if you look at the other cheap pitching options, none of these guys are very good pitchers. So as a result, I think a lot of people are saying like, hey, I don't want my entire night to be staked around Joe Boyle. I don't want my entire night to be built around Matt Waldron or anything like that. So as a result, you kind of get spread ownership going to these pitchers that are in this punt range. And right now we're talking about, by the way, that's any pitcher who's sub 8K we're talking about. So everybody from Paxton at 7,900 to Tommy Hendry at 5,700. And nobody is more than 20% owned, but a bunch of guys that are around 10% are picking up double-digit ownership. Do you have a favorite guy that you like rostering sub 8K? You kind of alluded you might have somebody before.
I don't. The guy that I like was Crochet. I mean, I think that you nailed it on the head when you said that the Dodgers are so expensive and they look like easily the top stack on the board. So when you're multi-entering, you want to get exposure to all these guys. There isn't one of them that I feel good about, though.
The one I get the most of right now in the Sims is Joe Boyle, and I see same deal as this morning. And also Jordan has a Sims run up on the screen, and you guys will see the Sims are also giving us a decent chunk here of Joe Boyle. Now, with that said, the Sims are giving us a wide array of pitchers. It's not like one guy is showing up in 70% of lineups or anything like that. We don't have anybody showing up in more than a third or so of lineups today, considering what the pitching options are on the slate. But Joe Boyle for me is the one that I prefer in this price range for a couple of reasons. Number one, as much as he walks a lot of hitters, he also does have some good stuff in strikeout upside. He's pitching at home in a pitcher-friendly park. He's got an okay matchup against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he's very cheap at $6,200. Of all the guys that I'm considering viable as punts, Joe Boyle is the one that is the cheapest of those guys. The only pitchers that are cheaper than him are Jonathan Belman. That is a no for me. This guy is terrible. We'll talk about the Blue Jays as a stack when we get to offenses. And then Tommy Henry, also not particularly good in an impossible matchup against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So with that being the case, Joe Boyle is the one who just by default is the cheapest option I'm interested in. So I'm going to be getting some exposure there, but I'm not going to go crazy with any of these cheap guys. Joe Boyle is the best of the worst for me on the slate of the punts.
I get that to a certain extent, but on the other hand, like I find it interesting. You're okay with Joe Boyle at 18%, but not at Severino at 20%. Basically the same. Now I know it's a big price gap, so that's why. Like, there's no other reason than just matchup too. Sure. I think that if I had to look at one guy down here that is not getting love, and I'm not sure why, it's Bryce Wilson. All these guys are not very good. He's got a really good matchup. I like the Rays in tournaments because I think they have upside, but their offense has been putrid basically all year. Certainly recently, just getting swept by Chicago. Like, should he be 2% owned and Waldron 14? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to baseball, it's pretty frequent. There'll be a lot of pitchers who are like 2% owned that you can make a case should maybe be a little bit more popular. I think the biggest issue I have with Bryce Wilson, though, is how deep is he going to go into the game? Because he's gone back and forth between pitching out of the pen and being a starter. So he's started 2 out of his last 3 appearances, but he also made a relief appearance in between those 2 where he only pitched 1 1/3 innings. So his last start, he went out and pitched 4 1/3 inning. I just don't know that he's going to be allowed to pitch more than 4 innings in this spot.
That's fair, and that would certainly be a reason not to play him. I just look at all these options, and I'm like, damn, Tampa strikes out a ton. He's not getting ownership, but, the pitch count is a real concern.
Let's pull up his pitch count, because I know he hasn't gone deep into games, but what has the pitch count actually been in those spots? Let's check it out. Bryce Wilson. All right, so his 2 starts this year, he's thrown 75 and 57 pitches. Yeah, I think it's probably where he's capped, somewhere around 75. It just makes it a hard button for me to click.
Yeah, I'm with that. Like, I don't particularly like him. I just don't really like any of these options personally.
One other thing I want to ask you, and it's going to be looking ahead a little bit here, and then also, Jordan, get the lineup generator ready because we could start looking at some lineups that we build in the lineup generator. If you had to stack against one of these cheap pitchers, which is the one that you think makes the most sense to stack against for leverage purposes as we're talking about some of the ownership on these pitchers?
Easily Joe Boyle. I mean, it reminds me of the first slate of the year with Boston against him. I know we talked about that at length. He puts guys on. I like Pittsburgh a lot here. They're 5th overall in the top stack tool, not even considering his ownership. So, yeah, I like Pittsburgh a ton.
We have a question here from John. John in Discord wants to know, when we get to the lower end guys, how do we feel about Rodriguez and Bailey Falter? All right, so first with Yariel Rodriguez, has a matchup against Kansas City Royals. It's somebody who Lofty and I also touched on a little bit on the strategy show where we're kind of walking our way through Yariel Rodriguez. I don't think he's going to be allowed to pitch more than 4 innings and starts. So what it is that the Blue Jays have done with Yariel Rodriguez is he's somebody who's kind of stretched out, but not with the intention of him being a starter all year. What they want to do is move him into a bullpen role. But what they have been holding his spot for, it's supposed to be Alek Manoah's spot. Have you seen what Manoah is doing in the minor leagues right now?
Yeah, he's awful.
So I don't know if Manoah ever gets called back up. I don't know that he makes his way back to the big leagues. Does that mean that they start to stretch out Yariel Rodriguez more? Potentially, but I don't want to put my money on it because if you look at Yariel Rodriguez so far this year, he has thrown how many innings? All right, 3 starts. 3 2/3 innings, 4 innings, 4 innings. And they've said publicly they're going to limit his innings this year. I think one of the dumbest things teams do is they care about innings more than pitches sometimes. So last start, for instance, Yari Rodriguez was pretty efficient. He threw 69 pitches to get through his 4 innings before getting taken out. The start before, he went 83 pitches and they still took him out after 4 innings. So that's why I think it looks like they're just taking him out after 4 innings, no matter what the scenario is, which is really limiting my interest in Yariel Rodriguez. Now, do they look at what's happening with Manoah in the minor leagues and say that, hey, this guy is getting his ass lit on fire by minor leaguers and it appears he can't be pitching at the big league level? Does that mean maybe they start to stretch out Yariel Rodriguez? Maybe. I just don't. I don't think that's what their plan is. That's also not what they've said they've done publicly. So I'm looking at Yari Rodriguez as a guy that we aren't going to be able to get more than 4 innings from. Makes me not want to play him.
I kind of differ from you here. Not that I want to play him, but this is a guy they signed to a pretty nice contract. He didn't pitch at all last year, pitched out of the bullpen the year before. I don't think they exactly know what they want to do with him. I know that in the previous start, it was kind of a slash opener type situation because Bowden Francis was coming in to pitch the majority of the game. He's hurt now. So I don't know what their plan with him is, but he's cheap. And I'm not ready to say that they're just taking him out after 4 innings because it's only happened twice, you know?
3 times. All 3 of his starts so far. But they did say their plan with him this year is for him to go back to being a reliever once Manoah gets called up. I mean, you just start to question though, Alek Manoah, who's, let's see, how many runs has he allowed in the minor leagues this year? He's made like 4 starts in the minor leagues and he has like an 18 ERA or something ridiculous. It's crazy, the downfall of Alek Manoah. Let's see. So in total, he has made across AAA and A ball in the minor leagues. Alek Manoah has pitched 13 2/3 innings. He's given up 19 runs in 13 2/3 innings in the minor leagues.
Is that good?
It's crazy. So we'll see. For now, though, I can't trust that Rodriguez is going to pitch more than 4 innings, so it makes me not want to go there. As far as Bailey Falter goes, yeah, he's going to be one of the guys that I'm rostering for cheap. I'm likely going to have more exposure to Joe Boyle because if you do look at the data that we have, Joe Boyle is $300 less expensive than Bailey Falter. He also has better top value odds. He's got a higher odds being a top scoring pitcher. He's also pitching at home, which makes a little bit of a difference. So between Joe Boyle and Bailey Falter, if I'm picking just one or the other, I slightly lean Joe Boyle. But Bailey Falter, I mean, anybody that isn't all that popular is going to be in play for me against the Oakland A's in all likelihood.
Certainly. Anyone who's not that popular and cheap against Oakland in play, but I'm with you. Per our tools, I think Boyle looks better for me. I just like Pittsburgh a lot.
And then I'm just David, that's all. And the YouTube chat says Manoah lost his control over a year ago. Yeah, I mean, he's also walking a ton of guys in the minor leagues. I mean, 13 2/3 innings. He's 9 walks. He's allowed 4 homers. I do wonder if it's just a combination of the pitch clock, not allowed to use sticky substances. Maybe all this was just things that really mattered to him and his ability to pitch well. But it's crazy. He was an actual Cy Young candidate 2 years ago and then was in the minor leagues last year. And seemingly there's a good chance Alek Manoah never pitches in the big leagues again if he just can't get out minor league hitters.
100% agreed. I mean, he's showing nothing. It's not even like he's teetering. Like he's straight up bad. So he's going to need to turn it around for a long stretch in order for them to even consider it.
And it doesn't look like we're getting any more questions in Discord on pitchers as of now. But if you guys do have any questions, throw those in. But I'll ask you, Matt, before we move on and start building lineups in the lineup generator. Do you have any final thoughts on pitchers? Anything we haven't mentioned here that you think is important before we go forward?
No, I really don't like pitching on this slate. Ryan is fine. I'm like not a huge Joe Ryan guy, and I hate playing him at really high ownership. But the other options aren't great. Fried and Crochet. Those 3 are my top 3, and I don't really like anyone else.
Yeah, it's a tricky slate for pitching. I know our data has a little bit of a lean towards Christopher Sanchez, so he'll make it into some of my lineups just based on that. But I'm personally not crazy high on Christopher Sanchez. So Jordan, let's go ahead and start building some lineups in the lineup generator here. We can see what we end up getting to. We're going to build lineups for DraftKings as well as FanDuel, and we'll see what pitchers we're getting to as well as stacks. And if you guys haven't checked out the lineup generator, if you sign up using the link that we have below, we've got a promo going on that's going to be expiring Wednesday. So just short little sale here. We ran it at the end of last week, and it's at the start of this week as well. If you sign up for the lineup generator using the link we have below and the promo code DOUBLE, you get access to the lineup generator for just $5. It's a great deal. In the lineup generator, it's going to build lineups for you on both DraftKings and FanDuel. You can customize those lineups if you want using our player projections and our ownership projections. Those are available right in the lineup generator here. So take advantage of this offer. Sign up. Get access for just $5. Like I said, every single package that we have here at Stokastic.com, it's going to get you access to our Discord channel. If you guys want to hang out, be part of our community, and ask me questions wherever you want over the course of the day, you get access to our Discord channel when you sign up with the lineup generator. Let's go ahead and look back over at the lineups here, Jordan. Let's go all stack types and go balance lineups today. I was considering saying contrarian, but there's also like not that much chalk on the slate. So he's got to clear his lineups from earlier. And then we will see what it is that we are getting to here. So we'll look at pitcher exposures, and then we'll look at stack exposures as well. So right off the bat here, lots of Dodgers I'm noticing, Matt. Mookie Betts, Will Smith, I see Ohtani, Pahe showing up in lineups, and pitchers there. I'm seeing Christopher Sanchez. I'm seeing Joe Boyle, Luis Severino. Are you surprised that we're not getting that much exposure to Joe Ryan here in the lineup generator?
No, because of the Dodgers. They're the clear priority over Joe Ryan.
Yeah, it looks like that's what, we're getting to 15% of them. It is the lineup generator is getting us a lot of the Dodgers. That's an opportunity cost. If you want to play Joe Ryan, you can't really comfortably stack the Dodgers, and vice versa. If you want to play the Dodgers, you can't really stack Joe Ryan. You can see here, lineup generator giving us 65% of the Dodgers, 50% of the Toronto Blue Jays, and then no other stacks really showing up prominently here in the lineup generator. But yeah, lots of Mookie Betts, Will Smith. Then you see George Springer, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and then, more Dodgers and Blue Jays bats. You scroll down there, Miguel Rojas, Varsho, and then as well, that looks like, I see Vlad in there as well, Kiki Hernandez. So lots of Dodgers, lots of Blue Jays. Would you agree those are the two top overall options on the slate if we were just looking at like which teams you think are the best options and score the most?
No, I would say the Dodgers for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto, no. Belman's not good, but I can't put a putrid offensively Toronto team ahead of teams like Philly and Arizona. Even Pittsburgh for me. I guess ownership agnostic, like Toronto looks better than Pittsburgh. This Toronto lineup has underperformed all year. Now you get them at home, which I guess is a good thing, but only guaranteed the 8 at bats. And again, when you consider ownership, they're coming in as the second highest owned team on the slate. Like, I get it. It's a play against Belman. He stinks. But the Blue Jays, besides like the back of their baseball cards in this lineup, haven't shown anything this year to make me say they're the second best offense. I could be completely wrong, though. What's your take?
I like this spot for the Blue Jays quite a bit. I don't think they're my single entry team today. We'll talk through that could potentially be later because the Blue Jays were only projected for 7% ownership this morning. That has come up to 11% now. So it's no longer a team I get to quite as much of. It is still a stack I have the most of on the slate. When I was running lineups for the strategy show this morning, I think the number I had was 44% Blue Jays stacks for my top 150 lineups. It's not nearly that amount anymore. It is now about 20%. Still my most roster team on the slate. It is entirely because of how bad Jonathan Belman is. His numbers in the minor leagues the last few years, I don't understand how this guy has found his way to the big leagues. Last year in AAA, AAA, he's pitching against minor leaguers. Belman had a 5.24 ERA, a 5.6 FIP. In AA last year, he had a 7.2 ERA, a 4.98 FIP. Going back to 2022, he had a 6.92 ERA and a 6.17 FIP in AA. And then you're looking at this guy, he's 27 years old. He's an unranked prospect. He doesn't have all that creative stuff. So I'm just confused how he's even in the big leagues to begin with. If he got destroyed by minor leaguers throughout his entire career, why is it going to go better for him at the big leagues?
That's fair. I'll counter that with he was a second round pick a few years ago, like 5 years ago. And he's been good this year. And I'm always like, I'm not buying what he's selling. I'm not looking to use him here. And I still think Toronto looks good. But again, I'm always, pitchers can pick up things even late in their career. I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but he is significantly better right now than he's been at any other point in his minor league career.
Maybe. I don't even know if that's true. I mean, he can't be worse than what he is. I mean, he made 4 starts in the minor leagues this year, and it was clearly not as bad as it was in the previous years. But I mean, 2.57 ERA, 3.66 FIP in 21 minor league innings. Sure, it's better than what he's been in the past. He only had one direction to go. It's hard for me to buy into this 27-year-old all of a sudden being serviceable. He also projects really poorly in pretty much all the projection models for future reference. The model that's the highest on him is Steamer has him with a 4.57 ERA the rest of the season, but the BAT has him at 4.96. Depth chart has him at 4.7, and that's with the assumption he's going to be a reliever, not even a starter. So, I mean, it's very rare you see a pitcher who's projected to have an ERA of around 5 as a reliever. So it's really hard for me to buy into this guy being anywhat decent. That's basically the only reason I like getting into the Blue Jays is how bad it looks like Belman is.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm more willing to say that the Blue Jays also are not very good. And while that might not be true long term, this offense has underperformed like for years now. They're good, but they're far from like the Dodgers, and they're getting ownership like they are. So this could blow up in my face. Toronto could just go off because Belman sucks. But I think there's other bad pitchers on the slate, and the ownership's there.
Yeah, and then, hey, I'm Drew 95S. What do we think about the bottom half of the Dodgers lineup? If you notice the players we're getting to in the lineup generator, it's the star players we're getting from the Dodgers. The bottom of the Dodgers lineup is really not all that appealing. If you're stacking the Dodgers, it's for the guys at the top of the order, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom of the order is where you get discounts, and I think they'll be lower owned. So there's merit there, but certainly the top of the order looks best.
So this is the same case for me as it was this morning, and not the first time I've said this year. And Jordan, you could start building out lineups for FanDuel as well. Build those in here, and then we'll check out what the exposures ended up being as we are getting back to it here. But if we're looking at the Dodgers as a team, I have by far the most 3-man stacks of the Dodgers of any team on the slate. I just don't have very many 5-man stacks of them because of how prohibitive the pricing is. I love them as a 3-man stack today, though. 5-man is just kind of difficult.
It's really difficult. You probably need to roster 2 of like the really cheap pitchers. And I get it why the Dodgers are getting a lot of love here. Henry's not good. I don't think he's as bad as a guy like Belman, though. I think he's better than a Joe Boyle right now. So I don't know. I'm not going to play the Dodgers or the Jays in like the 3-entry, single entry type stuff, but I'm well aware that could kill me.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you when we start looking at some of the other potential stacks to be getting to, at least for single entry purposes. I think there's other directions we could go. And I see there are people who are asking us questions about that in Discord as well. So we'll touch on those. As far as the exposure we're getting here on FanDuel, it's looking different. Right off the bat, I'm noticing a lot more Phillies that are standing out. Can you click the stack exposure, Jordan? Yeah. So 47% Phillies, 42% Blue Jays, 25% Dodgers, then some Pirates and Diamondback stacks mixed in there as well. So things are a little bit more spread out on FanDuel. And if we look at some of the exposures on FanDuel, or I should say the ownership in the top stacks tool, the Dodgers are crazy popular on FanDuel, projected for 17.4% ownership as a team. Philly's also more popular on FanDuel, 14.4%, but they're much cheaper on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings, which makes them a little bit easier to get to. That's why they're showing up in as many lineups as they are. Go back to the exposures tab, and let's see who the individual hitters are. Yeah, so Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Vlad, Springer, Betts, Turner, Varsho. So we're getting to a lot of stud hitters that are most rostered guys. And then at pitcher, we're getting to Max Fried. Fried is only $7,800 on FanDuel. And that does make him very, like, already he's somebody who's appealing on DraftKings. He is pretty hard for me to want to get away from. It's $7,800 over on FanDuel. One benefit of his price point on FanDuel, it does lower the ownership of Joe Ryan a little bit to the point where Ryan isn't nearly as popular on FanDuel. So you're getting Ryan as a contrarian option against the White Sox. Those are the top pitching options, in my opinion, on the low end and the high end on FanDuel. If you're paying up, Joe Ryan. If you're paying down, I mean, $7,800 for Max Fried is pretty crazy there on the FanDuel side of things. Anything else you're noticing from the lineup generator that stands out to you?
Not really. I think all the points you made are very well taken. Fried is too cheap, but, you know, again, pulling a lot of ownership, so do with that what you will.
Yeah, and then we do have a question related to FanDuel from Mr. Cool Cam, who wants to know what is our favorite contrarian stack on FanDuel. One of the teams that was showing up a good amount there in the lineup generator that I also think makes sense on the FanDuel side of things because of what their ownership is. And James Paxton is somebody who's not been terrible or anything to start the year, but we do have them with the third highest top stack odds on the slate. The Diamondbacks also do have a good offense, even if they've struggled at times this year. I mean, this is a team that was in the World Series last year. They have a lot of young talent, but 6% projected ownership going to the Diamondbacks. We have a 9% chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate. For the FanDuel side of things, that's my favorite contrarian stack for FanDuel, the Diamondbacks. Do you have a FanDuel specific contrarian stack you like for Mr. Poolcam?
I think it's Arizona on both sides right now. Again, there's really good hitting weather in this game. So I'm not going to be surprised if that bumps up Arizona's offense as well, especially with Blaze Alexander leading off. But right now, they look like the top contrarian team on both sides.
And then a four-prong digger asked a question here. He wants to know, Matt, what is your favorite single entry pitching duo? So if you were looking at two pitchers to play in a DraftKings single entry, he didn't specify DraftKings, but he asked for a duo. So gonna buy just using common logic. He's talking about DraftKings there. If you right now had to lock in a pitching combination for single entry, which direction would you go?
As funny as this is, the lock for me is Crochet. That's who I feel best about, given the ownership and everything we talked about. I go back and forth between Fried and Ryan. I'm more of a Fried guy. He doesn't have the strikeout upside that Ryan does. I don't like either of their spots like all that much. Sure, you get the White Sox for Ryan. I'm not a fan of pitchers making back-to-back starts against the same team. We just saw that with Ryan in Detroit. He was awesome the first start, not so much the second. And then Fried, he has not been great this year. He's coming off by far his best start of the year, but his only two good starts have come against Miami. Now, this is another guy whose underlying numbers are still good. So, long story long, Fried and Crochet.
For me, I think it's Crochet and Joe Ryan. But relative to ownership, Crochet is the one that is overall of the most interest to me if you're looking to be contrarian, especially if you are going with a chalky offense. You can really diversify that lineup by playing Crochet in a single entry, considering he's only projected for the 5% ownership there. And I think that has us all caught up on questions here. And Four Prong Dinger follows up and just says, you guys are great. Thanks. Thank you, Four Prong Dinger. We appreciate you. And also, anybody else, don't forget, if you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel to help support us here. Let's talk about stacks, Matt. And I want to start by bringing up the Los Angeles Dodgers. They are very popular on both FanDuel and DraftKings, or overall most popular stack on the entire slate. 15% ownership going to the Dodgers. They are technically underowned in the top stacks tool if we're taking pricing out of consideration, because we have them with a 17% chance to be the highest scoring team on the slate. What do you make of the Dodgers, considering their price, the ownership, and their top stack odds?
Man, it's really hard to get away from them. There's not a team that I'm going to prioritize like for my 3 entries because they're getting ownership. But I mean, going in, if you don't play them, that your night could be over quickly. This lineup is elite. They set up much better against lefties than they have in the past. Henry has actually shown some reverse splits, so guys like Ohtani, Freeman look elite. It's a really tough fade. I'll fade them, but I know that the best offense on the board, like pretty easily.
Yeah, I have, let's see, where am I getting my exposure to the Dodgers? I have a bunch of Mookie Betts. Betts is always really valuable because of his crazy position eligibility on DraftKings, where he's got the second base and shortstop eligibility. It's like the two hardest positions to fill, well, the catcher as well. So those 3 positions are the hardest to fill on DraftKings, and he's got the second base and shortstop eligibility. So that gets me to Mookie Betts right now as my most rostered hitter on the slate. Like I said before, though, it's just hard for me to get to 5-man stacks of the Dodgers because of the pricing. 3-man stacks look great. So overall, on the Dodgers hitters, I get to a bunch of them as one-offs and 3-man stacks. But the 5-man stacks is just going to be hard for me to get to as far as the Dodgers are concerned. What is the team you're eyeing for single entry you think stands out the most on the slate?
For me, it's Pittsburgh, like pretty easily. No ownership. I like the way this lineup sets up against Boyle. I know they're not the likeliest stack to succeed tonight, but they've got a similar top stack percentage as teams like the Jays and the Twins, and the ownership just isn't really there. So it's Pittsburgh for me, especially when you consider the ownership Boyle is getting.
I like Pittsburgh a bunch as a leverage stack. So right now, here are the three teams, if we're including all stack types, I get the most of. Toronto, Pittsburgh. Those are the teams I get the most of as a 5-man stack. And then as the 3-man stack, I'd mentioned the Dodgers before. But those are the three teams I have the most exposure to at the moment. And I wish that Joe Boyle was a little bit more popular, because then I could feel really good about saying in single entry, Joe Boyle is going to be like 30% owned. It would make more sense for leverage purposes there. I'm still just not sure what I want to do in single entry, though, because I'm not sure Boyle is going to be popular enough that the leverage I'm getting with the Pittsburgh Pirates is going to be the same in single entry as it is in large field tournaments. Or do you see it differently, where the field is just going to be jamming the Dodgers so heavy that Joe Boyle will end up being like 30% owned in single entry?
Not sure. I think that's a good point, but I'll counter that with, I'm not sure where Boyle's ownership ends up there. But if you're not stacking the Blue Jays and Dodgers, you're already different. So even if Boyle comes in like a little bit less owned than we expect, I'm not personally overly concerned about it.
Yeah, well, I'll be interested to see what that ownership ends up being. I do think ultimately it's just going to be a lot of Joe Ryan and Max Fried in single entry, and then Dodgers. I think this could be a slate where a lot of the field isn't making 5-man stacks in single entry and is kind of playing a bunch of one-offs and picking and choosing some Dodgers players with other players who might just project individually better for the slate. But we'll see. As far as a stack is concerned, those are three teams, and the Dodgers, the Pirates, the Blue Jays I have the most of in large field tournaments. But I don't want to play the Blue Jays or the Dodgers in single entry, considering how popular I think they could be there. So maybe it is the Pirates that I just land on for single entry. Are there any other teams that you're considering?
Arizona looks good. I think their ownership might be a little higher than expected. And the other team I like is Tampa. Ownership isn't really there. They haven't been good, but I still think their upside is right in line with the other teams on this slate. And they're a team coming in with nice leverage. So Pittsburgh, Arizona, Tampa for me.
See what other questions we were getting in Discord. There's one here from Einstein. He wants to know, what are thoughts on the Braves as a stack to be getting to just a third of the ownership of the Philadelphia Phillies? So we've got the Braves projected for very low ownership. It's rare you can get the Dodgers or the Braves at low ownership, and the Dodgers aren't today. But the Dodgers are so popular that it just kind of completely precludes people from being able to get to the Braves, because there's not a scenario where like the Dodgers could be 15% owned and the Braves could be 10% owned. There's just only so much spots available to pay up for an offense. So you do have this Braves team actually project for the third lowest ownership on the slate. Tough matchup against Bryce Miller, tough pitchers park as well. The main reason I am not going to be getting to the Braves today, it's just that price point, because they are so expensive that it makes it hard to get to the Braves. It's hard to get to the Dodgers as well, but at least the Dodgers are in a good spot, and I think it's fairly realistic for them to put up a big game. We only have the Braves with a 4.8% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate. It's not really a strong consideration for me. Do you see it differently with the Braves, Matt?
Not really. You rarely see Atlanta with such a low top stack percentage. Here we are, though. What I'll say about Atlanta is it's still the Braves. So on any given night, if Atlanta scores 10 runs, no one will ever be surprised. So that holds true tonight. If I were playing 150, I'd be over the 2.7% owned on the field. They're just not a team I'm prioritizing in smaller field type stuff.
Of all the teams that are projected for low ownership, and there's actually a good amount of them, because the ownership is so heavy on the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, the Phillies are really popular, the Reds, the Twins. And also another reason to like Garrett Crochet, the Twins are chalky today. You're getting some leverage if you're playing Garrett Crochet. But between the Diamondbacks, the Pirates, the Twins, the Reds, the Phillies, the Blue Jays, the Dodgers, that makes up for almost all of the ownership of the field. Everything else is pretty contrarian. Of the contrarian teams, do you have one you lean towards the most? Talking about teams that are the sub 6% ownership. So everybody below the Diamondbacks in terms of ownership stacks.
Yeah, it's Tampa for me. Again, they're just really, really low owned, high in the top stack tool, facing a not good Bryce Wilson and a Brewers bullpen that just got destroyed by the Yankees. So it's Tampa for me to answer that.
The Yankees scored 10 billion runs against the Blue Jays over the weekend. It was Saturday. They put up a bunch of runs. And actually, one thing that was a little bit annoying here as a little bit of a rant for me, Matt, I had a very good Yankees single entry team on Saturday and it had a chance to win tournaments, but then didn't because the Yankees pinch hit for all of their guys late in the game. And then on Sunday, I have a bunch of teams towards the top of leaderboards that were like Marlin stacks and some national stacks. And I needed the Yankees to not do stuff in the later innings. And then Anthony Rizzo stays in the game and hits a home run. If I could have just gotten that at bat out of him on Saturday, I would have had so much extra money in my pocket because it was already a good day. It could have been a really, really great day for me, but they pinch hit for everybody. And then I get screwed because they do the inverse on Sunday with Rizzo hitting that home run late. That aside, yeah, the Brewers bullpen is decimated from that spot against the Yankees because they got nothing out of their starting pitchers. They had to completely exhaust the bullpen over the week. And that's also why we saw position players pitching for them. So I think you could certainly make a case for the Tampa Bay Rays from that standpoint. Also, you combine with when we're looking at Bryce Wilson before, this is not a guy who's been pitching deep into games. It looks like a guy who might only be going 3-4 innings. The Brewers are going to have to tap back into that bullpen. So, by the way, people in chat saying Stan was big. No, Stan homered on Saturday. Am I remembering wrong? Didn't Stan homer at super low ownership? He was like 4% owned for the Yankees and homered on Saturday.
He was the one guy that stayed in and homered late.
Yeah. Stan did hit a homer on Saturday. That aside, for me, if I'm looking at one crazy low owned offense, the Seattle Mariners are 1% owned today against the chalkiest pitcher on the slate. I'm not going to say I'm jamming the Mariners in large field tournaments, but I have 5% of them. That's 5x the field. 1% ownership for the Mariners. How many spots are you going to have? The Mariners are 1% owned. The White Sox are 2% owned. The A's are 4% owned. The Rays are 4% owned. And the Mariners are only 1%. The Mariners have a better offense than these other teams, and there's some leverage.
Do they, though? Like, I think their upside maybe, but they have a lower top stack percentage in the White Sox. So that for me is a telling sign that, like, even if Fried isn't great tonight, I don't like the Mariners' chances to like be the leading stack on the slate. I think the leverage comes from just not playing Fried. Again, it's baseball, but that is eye-opening to me that they're the lowest top stack on the board.
Yeah, I mean it's clearly not a great spot for them, but with that said, still, I mean it's 1% ownership. There's leverage to be had against Max Fried. It's not going to be a core piece of my lineups. I want to have more than 1% of them, though.
Yeah, and your point about them being a better offense than these other teams, I don't disagree with that. Like the White Sox and the A's, certainly. So on that and the fact that Fried's getting ownership, I understand like why you have interest in getting.
Any other offenses on the slate here that are important to you in any kind of way?
The one team we didn't talk a ton about is Philly. So Canning has not been good this year. He's a guy who had success in the past, but not so much this season. Philly's even more expensive than the Dodgers. So you really have to sell your soul to get there. But they're getting half the ownership. And they also look good in the top stack tool.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Phillies going up against Griffin Canning. This is another team also that does look a little bit better now than they did earlier in the day. The one big issue you have with the Philadelphia Phillies is, once again, the pricing. They are crazy, crazy expensive. Phillies, though, they have come down a little bit in ownership from this morning, and their top stack odds have come up. As a result, I was not really getting to very much of the Phillies when I was prepping lineups this morning, and I do get some exposure to them now, which is more than I was getting to earlier. You mentioned Griffin Canning as being a guy who struggled this year, and that is very true. He's a 7.5 ERA, a 4.89 expected ERA, 5.35 FIP. His strikeouts are down this year. His walks are up. Another thing, too, that kind of lends some credence to the upside of the Phillies, 33% ground ball rate for Griffin Canning this year. He's never been a guy who's a fly ball pitcher or anything like that. But last year, he did have a 42.7% ground ball rate. Now it's all the way down to 33.3%. It looks like this is some sort of change that he's going through as a pitcher. And his velocity is down 93.6 miles per hour this year compared to 94.6 last year. There's certainly upside in the Phillies. I'm just not sure how much the price points are ultimately going to be prohibitive for me.
Yeah, I think that's a real Like it's tough to get there over the Dodgers, but a lot of people will feel that way. And I feel similarly about Arizona here.
So what is your, so Arizona, 6% owned, 8.5% top stack odds. Corbin Carroll is hitting all the way at the bottom of the order now, which kind of hard to know what to make of it. Is he still somebody that you would want to be including as part of Diamondback stacks? It's, this is a guy who was one of the top prospects in baseball, was an absolute stud last year, did tail off in the second half of the season. I don't have a great sense for who Corbin Carroll is going forward. I was positive he was going to be a star last year. Now I'm wondering if he was a little flukish. Still going to be good going forward. I'm not sure he's ever going to consistently be the guy from the front half of last year, though.
I'm actually still really high on him, just not right now. He had a swing last year against the Mets, actually, in mid-July, where he had a stinger in his shoulder. And I still don't think he's fully recovered from that. His numbers have been atrocious this year. He was never really great against lefties. So I would only include him in a stack to be contrarian, playing a bunch of Arizona stacks, but not a priority.
Yeah, so Diamondbacks, it's a team that, let's see, what is my current Arizona exposure? Yep, I've got some Arizona lineups. I'm about in line with the field. I see that Jordan's got ones that lineups he's run here, 8% exposure to the Diamondbacks. So yeah, pretty similar to what I've got here. Anything else you want to bring up with stacks? If not, we will double check to make sure there's no questions from Discord, and they'll do some dong picks as well.
Not really. I think your point about Crochet is we didn't even talk about that. The ownership Minnesota's getting. So that just makes me like him even more.
Yeah. And then in chat, IT Mercer said Minnesota and Oakland, sneaky stacks of the night. Minnesota, not sneaky. The field is getting to them. The field is not playing Crochet on the other side. The Twins are very popular.
Yeah, as they consistently have been. And watch for pinch hitters in that lineup too.
Yeah. Oakland, not popular though. So if you want to get to Oakland as a sneaky stack and save yourself some salary, yeah, that's going to be a low on team at 3% ownership. The Twins are the fourth most popular offense on the entire slate. So the field is absolutely going to be getting there. Let's look at some home run picks. And also in the chat, if you guys have home run picks for today, throw those into YouTube and I'll shout some of you guys out and look at your home run picks for yourself, Matt. Who are you picking to go yard? What is the dong pick of the day?
I'm going to go Jack Sawinski. Underlying numbers are really good. I like this Pirates offense. Give me Sawinski against Joe Boyle.
All right. Which direction do I want to go? The hitter I have the most exposure to is Mookie. I don't know if that's who I want to answer. It just feels like too cheap of an answer. Too easy. I want to make this harder on myself.
Yeah, probably a little too easy, especially with no cores. So if there was cores, maybe that'd be cool. But yeah, I think you need to pivot.
How about Vlad? I know he struggled this year. I don't know what the Blue Jays are doing to fuck up Vlad because he looked like a can't miss prospect, was really good a couple of years ago, and he's kind of dropped off a little bit. There's still a ton of talent there. I mentioned how good I think the matchup is against Bull, and also single-digit ownership going to Vlad. I think he's a very good one-off play. I still think the talent is there for upside, particularly in the power department. Give me Vlad as a home run pick of the day. I think this is the third time I've gone with Vlad this year, and he has not come through on any of those other ones. As for chat, let's see what we have coming in here. Flim Flam Man has got Jake Sawinski. Sports Wiz going with Blaze Alexander. Is Blaze Alexander the best name in sports right now? It's fucking cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And he's leading off today and been great against lefties. So great one-off. Nothing else.
I want to start calling Jordan Blaze Alexander. It's just a cool name.
Yeah, I wish that were my name.
Yeah. Blaze Alexander. Michael Roundtree's going to Will Benson. Jose Mora's got O'Neill Cruz. Bryce Harper from J.R. Whopper. Andy Pajes from Casey Leatherwood. Haunted Joe says Julio Rodriguez end on the first pitch. That's one thing I always think is funny about the home run picks is people start to one up each other as you go along, where people are like, hey, this guy's going to homer in the third inning. This guy's going to hit 2 homers today. But that's when we've got one right there is the first pitch call from Haunted Joe from Julio Rodriguez. Teoscar Hernandez from Malucar. I'm Just David is going with Manny Machado. Sotex has got Will Smith. Jordan Villabos is going with Kyle Schwarber. Jake Swales, there it is. Michael Harris double dong. That's that one I'm going to say is fairly unlikely.
Have you ever seen
back Bobby Witt? There we go. Devin Neiman saying Vlad is eating too much poutine. I actually think part of the issue with Vlad might be the weight he's lost. We've seen that with other players in the past. Vlad's actually in the best shape he's ever been in. I do wonder if he's just better at carrying the extra weight. Like if you remember back in the day, CC Sabathia went on the no Captain Crunch diet and lost like 60 pounds just by not, because he used to eat, it was like 2 boxes of Captain Crunch per day, just entire boxes of Captain Crunch. And he lost a bunch of weight just by not eating Captain Crunch anymore. And what happened, his velocity was way down the next year. And he was like, hey, I have to get out of shape to be a good baseball pitcher again. So who knows? Maybe Vlad just hits better when he's fat. He's got to put the weight back on. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got NBA Live Before Lock coming on next. Then after that, Josh and myself, we're going to be watching games in playback. So come sweat out the games with us after NBA Live Before Lock. And you never know if players get scratched or what other things might change over the course of the night. So another reason to watch in case things change after lock. Happens all the time. But guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you back here in playback in, about an hour or so. So peace out and good luck tonight.